David, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh, I've been looking forward to this. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, I think we met in those Facebook networking groups, right?
We did, yeah, and you were a guest on my show.
Yes, and now you are blessing us with your presence, which I'm so excited about. Your story is one that is very different. I do want to put a trigger warning that it is a very heavy, very triggering story to hear. But like I said before we started recording, I really think just by seeing the person that you are, despite of the really crazy things that you've gone through, you've been put on this world and you've been given a platform for a reason. And I really just want to give you space and grace and thanks for wanting to come on and share the shit that you've gone through. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, right back at you. I appreciate it. I have become a fan of you and your show, and your platform is incredible. And it's really cool when people like us get together and we want to make a difference and we combine forces and make it happen.
Ooh, absolutely, absolutely. So let's start off with an introduction for people who are meeting you for the first time. Let them know in your own words, who is David Keck?
My name is David Keck, and I am an open gay man in the South, which plays a huge factor into my story. I am the host of Surviving Abuse podcast. I have been thriving for quite a while with this new journey that I've been on. And I guess that's the sum of.
And I just love that you've been able to turn your pain into power, which is really what my podcast is all about. But before we get started in what you experienced, I always start off with every guest that comes on to talk about childhood, adolescence. You mentioned that you are an openly gay man in the South. And I'm curious to know, were you openly gay back then? Like, how did life look like for you growing up as a gay man in the South?
I am so lucky and so blessed. I have an amazing family, have an amazing support team. I did not come out until I was 18. It was a battle that I battled within myself, mostly because of religion and what I have been taught by outsiders of my family. And I was very lucky. My parents set me down when I was 18. My high school girlfriend and I broke up, and they set me down and they're like, David, we want you to accept who you are and love who you are. We're not trying to take away from your timing of things, but we don't want you to date girls, potentially marry a girl, have a family with a girl in your heart, not be in it, and not be able to let us love all of you. I was real blessed with that. I have such an amazing family. We had hard times growing up like normal families do. I didn't know that I didn't have everything until someone told me I didn't, which I thought was really cool. Like, I grew up thinking I had everything. And then someone told me one day that I didn't, and that really hurt. So I now use that when I talk to children and my nephews and stuff, and I don't take away from anything, because sometimes people just don't know that they're missing something until someone tells them.
That is so beautiful that you had that experience, because I know a lot of people in the queer community, they don't have that type of support, especially from their immediate family. So I'm sure that was like a weight off your shoulders, because for 18 years, you were basically pretending to be someone and living a life that was not your full truth. Now, I want to talk about the brutal hate crime that you went through. Again, I want to put a trigger warning out there that what he's going to talk about can be triggering, but it's your experience, and I would love for you to talk about, again, in as much or as little detail as you're comfortable with, what happened to you.
Absolutely. And I do appreciate the trigger warning, and I will hit that a couple of times throughout the episode for reminders. I am definitely an open book. My situation, this is kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but my situation was very public. So I had no choice but to be an open book, which ended up playing into my favor. So 8 years ago, I was going through a breakup. This guy and I have been together for a couple of years. We were going to build a home and a life together. We decided to break up instead. So I was a little down, and some friends called me and asked me to join them for a good friend's birthday. There's a little karaoke bar that we go to. It's predominantly straight, but I never felt out of place there. I would get on stage and sing Shania Twain, Man, I Feel Like a Woman, and the guys would buy me a beer and do a shot with me and a high five. Like, it was never a thing, you know? So when my friends called and invited me, I decided, you know what? I can't just sit around and feel bad about this breakup. I've got to move on. So for the first time in 3 days, I showered and shaved and got dressed up and went out. Was there with a group of friends. I want to preface the part that I'm about to get into with A lot of this is pieces that we've put together through surveillance, through witnesses, and through some parts of the confession, which we'll never know the full truth of. So allow grace with that. But I got up from the table and I was going to the restroom. And this man stopped me and talked to me, is what the surveillance shows. There was no audio, obviously. It was a loud bar, but it looked like a pleasant conversation. I had just started a new business venture, so I gave him a business card that had my information on it. I went to the restroom by myself, came back, sat with my friends. We finished our cocktail, paid our tab, and surveillance show that we three walked out together. And about 2 to 3 minutes later, surveillance shows that the man that had stopped me also walked out.
You never saw him before that, right? Like this was your first encounter?
Yes. And we later learned through court and everything that this was his first time in that facility. He had recently been discharged from the military due to marijuana. He and his girlfriend / mother of his child were fighting and she kicked him out. He lived maybe an hour away from the bar. What we think happened is my friends say that they saw me leaving the parking lot. Then they left and it appeared that I was by myself. Obviously, I got in my car quickly and left. So we're thinking that because of the business card and my information that he was able to either follow me or Google me and find where I lived. And he knocked on my door. And when I opened it, he's trained military. He said that he knew how to have me knocked out on the first hit. Again, trigger warning, but my body was moved room to room. I was being brutally raped. It was like a horror movie. There were claw marks down the halls where you could see I was just trying to grab a hold of something. When they had to do the rape test, they found that there were pieces of plastic and candle wax inside of me. He was estimatedly beating and abusing me for 2 hours. He got my cell phone, called the mother of his child, and confessed to murder. And she begged him to turn himself in. He said that I started flopping like a fish out of water, and then my lips turned blue and I stopped. And he was like, I knew for sure that I was dead. So he took my credit cards, my cash, and my car and went bar hopping. And he went to this bar covered in my blood and was confessing to the patrons about the F-slur he just murdered. They reported him to the bartender, and the bartender called security and they kicked him out. That was it. So now he's got a buzz, gets in my car, wrecks my car into, luckily no other cars or anything were involved. He went into a ditch. And then when the police showed up, he confessed to murder. He did tell the police at the scene that he murdered me because I was sexually propositioning him. He did confess in court that he knew that if he said that to these white, straight, Southern police officers, that they would be lenient on him. And he was right. They stopped and got him a McDonald's burger, a pack of cigarettes, let him smoke cigarettes, eat his burger, all while an alleged dead body was somewhere. I was found in my apartment 18 hours later, and I was being pronounced dead, but my foot moved, and they realized that I was not dead.
Okay, well, let's stop there because that's a lot. Literally sounds like a Lifetime movie. It is insane to me that you have been able to survive from something so incredibly heartbreaking to listen to, let alone live through. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. I just want to say that first and foremost. I'm so sorry that you experienced that, but I'm so glad that you survived it. I'm so glad that you're here to share your story because you are literally an angel on earth. I don't know what you believe in, but I believe in God. Truly, as shitty as the experience that you went through, you survived it for a reason, for you to be sitting here today, for you to have your podcast and your platform to share your truth and your story and give people hope that there is healing that can come from this situation and other types of abuse, right? So I want to know, you can continue afterwards, but like what happened, if you're comfortable talking about what happened legally to this person?
So I think one of the parts that is most frustrating is the legal side of things. So I live in Tennessee, and if anybody knows anything about Tennessee right now, we've taken a million steps back. But 8 years ago, it was election year for judges, and there was the same-sex marriages exist and all these things. And so unfortunately, mine happened during one of those times where they really wanted it swept under the rug. My attacker did 4 months in county jail, never made it to prison. They dropped all the charges. They actually did a lot of victim blaming, pretty much stating that a gay man should not be going to a straight bar. And if I sexually propositioned him, I got what I deserved. People were actually messaging me wanting to find me and finish the job. So he was sentenced to 12 years, but he did 4 months, never made it to prison, and was released on good time before I could even walk without a walker.
Jesus Christ.
He is not a registered sex offender, and so he's living next door to your children today.
I literally have no words, but it's sad to say that it's not surprising how fucked up this legal system is, especially when it comes to outside the norm, people who are not normal in these people's eyes. And it's just really so unfortunate. How does it still affect you in regards to not really getting the justice that he deserves? Honestly, for me, he deserves to be under the jail. But how do you navigate that?
So that has been a roller coaster. 8 years really isn't that long ago. And then when you throw 3 years of COVID in there and how that interferes with that, because I'm a huge believer in therapy, I was going to sexual assault group therapy every Thursday, which helped save my life. During the recovery, I got very depressed. I got down to 98 pounds. I was mistaken often for a drug addict. I was terrified. I became famous in a small town, and so many people were messaging me wanting to find me and finish the job. When this happened with court and then letting him out, it just really showed me where I stood in this world and where my community stands in this world. And that lit a fire. It lit this spark in me. And I was like, I have got to do something for the other little Davids out there. I know so many people that would have turned to drugs and alcohol, and I know that I wanted to, but I couldn't. Thank goodness I had such an amazing support team, because I know so many gay men and women out there that would not have the people to love and lift them, and they would have laid there and died. And so in order for this and what happened to me to not be in vain, I have to find a way to make something ugly into something beautiful. And that has been my goal. I will say that what I have learned is our judicial system here in the States is not rehabilitating. If I had the option for him to do 12 years and do the full time and to not be rehabilitated, it would have done no good. If they would have came to me and said, and something that I want to be a part of changing is if they would have came to me and said, he's getting a year in prison and he's going to therapy 3 times a day. He is going to be rehabilitated for us to work extremely hard for him to be somebody that you would want living next door to you. I would take that over this slap on the wrist for 4 months or versus 12 years. I would take that. I want us to become rehabilitating. We're not getting to the core of the problem in our country.
I couldn't agree with you more. It makes me think about my situation and being a survivor of domestic violence, right? And luckily for me, and I don't take this in vain, I was able to get justice in a way that a lot of people don't. Now, he was looking at a very long sentence because he was a habitual offender, but some shit happened with evidence or whatever, and he ended up getting 4 years. So I'm grateful for that. But like you said, the legal system does not set up these people to rehabilitate and to really figure out what is going on with you that we need to work on in order for you to heal that hurt and that pain that's inside of you. They're just thrown in a fucking box, kept in there, and then when they come back out, usually they do it again, or usually it gets even worse. So it's that's the problem that needs to be fixed, not putting the blame on the victim of what did you do to deserve it? What did I do to deserve getting beat or a knife to my neck and strangled and all these things? No, the question needs to be, what is going on with this individual and how can we help them? That's the question that needs to be asked, and that's where the work really needs to happen. So I want to know for you, since we're talking about the whole healing and maybe forgiveness, I don't know if that's the right word, but have you been able to forgive your attacker? And do you think forgiveness is necessary for a survivor of trauma in order to really heal or start the healing process of what has happened to them? What are your thoughts around that?
This is such a good question. And I've really been putting a lot of thought into this with other interviews that I've been on and just where I am in life. I want to say first, forgiveness is such a big word for a small man. And I battled with this, but then I realized that The only reason I'm searching or trying to make myself think that I need to forgive to heal is because that's what people tell me that is the right thing to do. What I finally realized is it's like you can't say that you hate someone when you never love someone. How can I forgive someone when I never had that relationship with them? What I have learned for me is I don't need to forgive him to heal and move on. I need to accept what has happened and start regaining that control. I was put on a path that I did not choose, but I can drive this damn car now. But as far as the word forgiveness, I have come to terms to that has really helped me is forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for me. I became someone that I wasn't. I became angry. I became bitter. I was mad. I hated God. I was so mad at God. I was so mad at me. I was like, when I thought those 18 years of my life, when I thought that being gay was wrong, and every day, multiple times a day, I prayed that God would take this away from me. I gave my life to you like you asked me to do. And where the hell were you? Like I just went through this bitter, this anger, but then I forgave, but I forgave me. I forgave me for that, for being in that dark place. I forgave me for having those ugly, mean thoughts about myself and about religion and about people. And when I realized that forgiving me is not victim blaming me, I became someone I didn't like, and I deserve to forgive myself for that. And I also deserve to have that moment while I was trying to find this new David. And so, I've not said this spill out loud very much, so I don't know if I made myself very clear. It's all been thoughts I've had in my head. So if people are kind of like, what the hell is he saying? I don't know either. All I know is I forgave myself and I feel better.
That's so real. That's such an honest answer. And I appreciate that because I honestly feel like people who have gone through trauma, like I get exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you mean. Even if it doesn't make sense in your own head, I'm like, I fucking get it because I felt that way too. And I was asked that question a few times being on podcasts, like, have you been able to forgive your abusive ex? And I was like, it took me a while. And I don't know if I'm fully there, even though I wrote like a letter of forgiveness to him at the end of 2022. But it really did start with forgiving myself and not putting the blame on me, like you said. We did not deserve, we did not ask what happened to us. But in order for us to really start to move on, we have to, like you said, accept what happened because we can't change it. We cannot change the past. We cannot predict the future. But if we really want to start moving on, we have to try to let go of those feelings because they can really consume you and you can go into this really deep depression that I'm sure you experience and I definitely did as well. But we've been able to pull ourselves out of it despite the feelings that come with it. So I love the vulnerability and thank you so much for sharing that. So what would you say to someone who is listening, who's afraid to live their truth as a queer person because of the ramifications that can happen, like what you experience? What advice would you give them in order to fully stand in their truth?
This world is scary for everybody, one way or another. Anybody and everybody that is passing judgment and criticizing you or making you feel down or even fearing, accepting and being who you really are, they're still living their life without your permission. So don't ask them for theirs.
Absolutely. You don't need to ask for permission. You just need to do whatever it is that makes you happy and be around the people who make you happy and set those boundaries and fuck you to anyone else who thinks otherwise. All right. So now I want to talk about your podcast, Surviving Abuse, and how it came to be. And I would love for you to share, like, what is your purpose behind your brand?
Yeah. So I had recently gotten started in, well, I guess the beginning of COVID, I started getting into podcasts and I was like, I like this and kind of starting to get the itch to want to test the waters and maybe try it. But, it's one of those things that's so easy to just not do. So I guess that was a little bit before COVID and then COVID hit and therapy and everything stopped. And I had individual therapy every Monday. And then Thursday, I had my sexual assault group therapy and all of that stopped. And I needed it so bad. I didn't realize how much I needed it. So I was like, if I'm going through this, then other people are too. And I was searching for podcasts and I was finding a lot of true crime podcasts and they would be very supportive to the victims, but I can tell you 100 serial killers, but I can't tell you the first name of a victim, right? And so I was like, I want to, because I love true crime. And I was like, I want to do something true crime related, but where I focus on the survivors. And that will also be part of my therapy. So I was like, okay, I'll spend the $1,500 on the equipment. I'll record 2 episodes. My mom will give it a heart on whatever social media I'm on, and then I'll get bored with it and put it in the closet, right? And I was so wrong. People were just messaging me over and over like, this has helped me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep going. And so here we are going on 2 years now. As a victim, you can probably relate to this, Liam, but I have a hard time congratulating myself. I have a hard time celebrating me. And we get into those moments of, okay, something just really cool happened. When's the next shoe going to drop? When is this going to be taken from me? And for the first time with my podcast, I wake up every day patting myself on the back. I wake up every day with messages from people just saying thank you. And that just keeps me going. It's my motivation. It's the fuel to my fire. It makes me want to look at how I can be a part of bringing awareness and changing laws and waking people up. And girl, it's working.
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
so proud of myself for that. And so I want to keep going with it. Every week, I have a new episode that comes out every Thursday. I am in interviews quite often. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I didn't know about until now, just like you are very aware of.
Yes.
I love how diverse my audience is, and we will never victim shame. And one thing that I think is very important, and I think you and I conversed on this before off the record at one point, but we cannot compare traumas. What I went through is the hardest thing I went through. What you went through is the hardest thing you went through. We cannot compare it to anyone else's, and that is not what my platform is for. I've had people message me and say, David, I've heard your story. My story doesn't touch this. Yes, it does. It's not fair for you to take that away from you or me. So I really want people to understand that we discuss all forms of trauma, and we have built such a loving, supportive community, and everyone is welcome.
Yes, I love your podcast so much. I've listened to a few episodes and it's just amazing to hear so many survivors have gone through so many different types of situations and they've been able to really turn that around. And I think that's so beautiful. I love what you're doing. Please don't stop. Please continue because you're helping so many people that you don't even realize that you haven't even met yet. And the same for me when I started sharing my story, it first started off with me talking about what I went through. It just blew my mind how many people really resonated with it because when I was in that situation, I felt so alone. I felt like no one could understand. And it really was a form of healing for me as well. So I really want listeners to you don't need to start a podcast. You don't need to do this grand thing that we decided to do, but really just know that there is healing in storytelling, in giving your pain a voice and being able to find a community of people who understand because they are out there. That's how me and you have been able to connect through our pain. Okay, so I want you to think about your life, everything that you've gone through, good, bad, and ugly. What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned about yourself and the things that you've gone through? And what are you most proud of about David?
Definitely this hate crime / podcast journey. I have found when people want to say their trauma has made them stronger, I kind of argue that. I think my trauma made me realize how strong I already was. I don't think that's what made me stronger. I think this is what tested my strength and I nailed it. It just feels so good to feel good again. And I actually was a guest on a podcast and they do this rapid fire question and you're supposed to just answer real quick. One of the questions that they asked me was, would you change what happened to you? And immediately I said no. And I even, you can see on video where I was like, wait, what the hell did I just say? I did not expect to say that. When the episode was over, I had to go outside with the dogs and a glass of wine and just kind of process and think. And I thought, you know what? For so long, I would have done anything to have not went out that night. I would have done anything to have said, let me just stay in this bed and be depressed one more day. Now, I wouldn't pick for this to happen, but I'm starting to enjoy the ride. And I think that is so important.
Can I ask, what would you say is the turnaround for you? What made you get to that point to feel like, not that you're glad it happened, because absolutely not, but now that you're able to have that mindset to be like, yeah, I'm kind of grateful that I went through everything that I went through because of who I am today. What was that turnaround for you?
I remember the moment exactly. This could be a long story, but I'll make it, as
No,
quick as
please.
possible. But
I got nothing but time for you.
perfect. But I did not know hate existed until 8 years ago. I've seen it on TV. I knew it was out there, but it was never in my world, meaning the friends and family and support that I had. I got an email from a gentleman right after, I think I was like 3 or 4 episodes deep into my show. And I got an email from a guy that said, I don't listen to podcasts. And if I did, I would not listen to one like this. But he got in his girlfriend's car to just run to the store to get some milk real quick. She had the show on and he couldn't figure out how to change the channels and turn it off or whatever. So it was like, it was the universe is what it was, making me listen to it. And he was like, I heard your story and I heard your victim's impact statement that I had written to read to my attacker in court. He said his brother came out of the closet and he's not talked to him since. That he just disagrees with everything about it. And he said, but I listened to your story and I thought I could have turned on the news and that could have been my brother. And he said that changed everything for me. And that happened around Thanksgiving. Well, then Christmas, I get a notification on my phone to my email that, and the subject line said, you did this. And I open it and it's a picture of the man that emailed me, his girlfriend, the gay brother, and the gay brother's boyfriend at a drag show. They took a picture and said, you did this. And that was the moment that everything changed.
I just got like full body goosebumps. That is,
me too. It's even getting me a little teary eyed. Like,
yes. That is so powerful. And you see, I'm telling you that right there, that is your purpose. That is why you went through what you went through and why you're here today, to be able to help others just by sharing your truth. I really want people to take away from listening to this episode and listening to David's story. It's like, you have no idea the impact that you can make on someone by just talking about what you went through. As painful as it is, as scary as it was to go through, as uncomfortable the healing process has been, like, it's not been rainbows and butterflies at all. And I'm sure there's still moments that you suffer from what you went through, but just to be able to get an email like that, or get a review or a comment or a DM or whatever it is, by just simply sharing your truth and helping someone else, like, that right there is fucking worth it. I do want to ask you this question because I was diagnosed with PTSD and I still do have moments of challenge when it comes to healing and thriving from the abuse that we've gone through. So how do you navigate those moments that come up for you when it comes to this whole healing journey of maybe a trigger comes up, or maybe like a smell or a show or something brings you back to that moment? What advice would you give to someone who may be struggling with that healing process and the dark days that do come with it?
that is something that we all deal with. And we all have our own thing, like mine is sounds. Trigger warning again, but what my therapist thinks is when my face and head was being kicked into cabinets. When like a cabinet door slams, when you're cooking in the kitchen and you're shutting a cabinet door and it slams. No matter how lightly you do it, it slams. Even talking about it right now, I feel like I'm starting to sweat a little bit. Like I can hear that sound. The thing is, therapy worked for me. My podcast works for me. I found what works for me. I was able to recognize these triggers, and instead of trying to push it off, I acknowledge it. I'm able to tell myself, okay, David, you're not in that place. Look at your surroundings. Take a deep breath. And it sounds so corny and so silly, and it sounds easy, but it's not. And so once you accept those things, once you realize that this is who I am right now, I think as victims, one of the reasons we have such a hard time is we want to put everyone else first. We think that this happened to us because we are the dirt on everyone's shoe. And that if I realize that I'm having a moment and I'm being triggered and I need to just step away into a room where I feel safe and breathe, that I'm being selfish. And you're not. You're allowed that.
Yes.
Do
Give
that.
yourself that permission and that grace.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My therapist, shout out to Dr. Lambert, he also told me too, like when those triggers come up, it's okay to surrender to them, but not to stay there for too long, and to acknowledge this is just a thought, this is just a feeling that's normal to feel. And then we can just let it go because, like you said, you're not back in that space where you were. And it's okay to not feel guilty or sorry for yourself for that moment coming up because it's part of the process.
Yeah, I love that your therapist said that, because one of the quotes that I've always said that has kind of caught on with my show that people have really held on to the point that we're having to make merch with it is that it's okay to visit those dark places. Just don't unpack your suitcase and live there. Those dark places come there for a reason. Explore those. Allow that time. I have time that I set aside that's for me to think of, I got pissed off today at work over something that's really minor. What's the core of the problem? Why am I really upset? Once I realized that allowing myself to do that is the biggest gift I can give to anybody that loves me, because I'm fully letting them know me. I'm letting them have all of me and not just the pieces that I think is good enough.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I love that you're having merch. That's like major. Congratulations. So I have a question that popped up in my brain. It's not one that I wrote out, but I'm curious to know, because when it comes to survivors of trauma and abuse, some people hate the word victim. They don't like to label themselves as a victim. I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. So I want to know, what are your thoughts around that word victim, and how are we able to turn it around so that we don't feel like a victim and we do feel like a thriving survivor?
So one of the questions I ask people, and not necessarily even for an answer to, but for them to think about, that I also do for myself, is when we hate certain words such as victim. I don't hate that word. I was a victim of a hate crime. Now, what I do after that is what will make me a survivor. And that's what I thrive to be. That's what my goal is to get to. That's what I identify as now. But I'm not going to take away the fact that someone violated me. Someone came into my home and body without my permission and took. For the longest time, I would say my joy was stolen, and it wasn't. It was temporarily put on hold, but I don't hate the word victim. And so the challenge I ask people is, do you hate that word because of the stigma that comes around it, because of what society has taught you it is? Or do you hate it because you truly know the definition and for yourself, you've made that decision to hate it?
For me, I remember in the beginning, I would say, I'm not a victim. Fuck that. I'm not a victim. That makes me feel weak. And with therapy and with my podcast and talking about it, it's like, no, I was a victim. I was a victim of domestic violence. Absolutely. Am I still a victim? Hell fucking no. Now I am a survivor. Now I am thriving. But in the beginning, in that moment, it was like, yeah, I went through something really fucked up. And I felt bad about it, right? And that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. But like we said before, you don't need to unpack your suitcase and stay there. You can turn it around and turn that trauma into something beautiful. You're a living example of that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And I would like to say, too, kind of riding the coattails off of that, if you don't mind, is people have asked me how I and why I came up with the name Surviving Abuse, because would people want to wear that on a t-shirt? And I get that side of it, but I'm like, this is part of normalizing it. It makes me a little nervous to sometimes wear it on a t-shirt because, girl, you better believe I'm wearing my own damn merch. I'm proud of it. But it's like, are people going to see that? Like, if a woman's wearing it walking through Walmart with her husband, they're going to be like, what has he done to her? But we have to normalize these conversations. We have to normalize the fact that, unfortunately, this exists, but until we get to the core of these problems, it's going to be there. And when we're hiding around those fluff words, we're not getting there. So one of the conversations I had that I thought was pretty interesting that reminds me of the word victim is surviving versus survivor. I feel, at least right now, and again, my trauma is 8 years old, it's fairly new. I feel right now that I'm surviving. When I say the word survivor or try to call me that, I get this weird feeling with it. It's just a personal thing. I know that every day I'm surviving and I'm doing whatever I can to survive, and it's a continuous thing. I feel like saying a survivor is putting that finalized I'm over it. I'm done. Closure to it. And maybe one day I will be there. I simply am not. And so I went with surviving because I felt like a lot of people that I was talking to did not like to make it sound so if I say I'm a survivor, that means it's over and I've moved on, when it will be his fingerprints, my attacker's fingerprints will be on me until the day I die.
That is so real.
So that's why I kind of went with the name. And so survivor, surviving, and victim are all three words that I think that we all three kind of battle with. But when we think of like the stigmas of survivor means I'm strong, I'm not weak. And so that's what we all want. And that truly is what we all want. But I think we've got to find and set our own definitions. Mine to all three words are going to be different than yours, and set the society definition away from it, because that can be dangerous.
Absolutely. And I love that you said normalizing having these conversations, because it is happening. And for us to be a voice for the voiceless who haven't gotten to the point that they're comfortable with talking about it, hopefully just by listening to your episode or my episode or whatever, we're able to give that hope that there is healing that can come from it. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you had the opportunity to say something to your attacker, being the man that you are today and the healing that you've been able to achieve, what is one thing you would tell him?
Honestly, at this point, I would say thank you, because my family was tested. My beliefs were tested. I was tested. My community was tested. I'm still every day tested. And I could never say that I'm weak. And 8 years ago, I would have described myself as weak. There are so many things I would love to say to him, but then there's that part of me that's like, does he deserve that? So I get so torn with it. I actually sat down before we got on today and thought a lot about that question. And I've got notes beside me. I was like, at first I wanted to say shame on you, but I ended it with thank you. So if you asked me one thing, it would be thank you.
That is so real. I thought about that question myself. Like, what is something I would say to my ex if I ever saw him again? The first thing would be, fuck you. I fucking hate you, right? That's just the real human in me, right? Like, I do have emotions and feelings, but just thinking about everything that I've gone through since that night, and just the woman that I'm becoming and evolving into, and the work that I'm doing and the people that I'm meeting like you, it was because of that night. It was because of that experience. Would I want that to happen to me? No, absolutely not. Would I want that to happen on my worst enemy? Would I want that to happen to him? That's a question I still need to ask myself, right?
Sure.
But I am grateful for everything that has happened since. I'm not grateful for the experience, but I'm thankful and grateful for who I am today because of it. And I think people, unless you've been through some sort of shit like we've been through, they might be like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, that sounds so strange. But I think like you really don't understand it until you've been in that sort of situation that truly changes your life. And for that, I am grateful and thankful. So I get you. But it's so many layers, right?
Absolutely. You know what I wish, and what I am working with some people on seeing if it could ever be something to explore as an option. Laws and stuff will have to change. That'll be a whole other podcast. You can have me on when that happens. But you had mentioned at the end of 2022, I think you said you had written a letter. I find so much strength and power in that. And I know that you've mentioned on your show, and when you were a guest on my show, we definitely discussed it. And so one thing that I would love to share with you and your audience is the very first episode on my podcast is 6 minutes long, and it's me reading my victim's impact statement. So I spent all this time writing 6 or 9 pages, however long it was, and got up the courage, I thought, to stand up when a man that I don't know tells me that you have X amount of time to come up and read your victim impact statement, and you can say whatever you want to say. I appreciate that. However, I wasn't ready. So that moment, I had someone else trying to drive my car. They're telling me that you get one time and it's now or never. And I walked up and I was trembling. I was shaking. I was breathing the same air as this man that wanted me dead. Knowing that his supporters and family and people were behind me, they know what I look like. They know who I am. They can point me out of a crowd. I have no idea who they are. So when I walked up and it was time to read it, I put the letter back in my pocket. And I said, all I can do is focus on the good now, and walked away. And I have felt so robbed since then. And so when I was talking to my partner about starting a podcast, he was like, David, why don't you start it out by reading your victim's impact statement? Because that's something you never got to do. And it was so cool. It was so amazing. But one thing I would love to change and that I would like to get with the right people, and I'm researching on how to do, I would love to find a way to reach out to the right people and say, I'm ready, and be in a room with him. And of course, it would be supervised, and read my letter to him when I'm ready. And I wish that for victims. I want that for victims. And I want to find a way to change that. I want that to be part of the sentencing. Is I don't care if it's 20 years from now, if you get a phone call that on this date and this time, you've got to set your ass down in this chair and listen to this person talk, then damn it, you're doing it,
Yes.
or you violate your probation and you go back to jail, whichever. Like, that's what I want it to be. But one of the reasons I wanted to say that, and your prime example too, writing that letter, whether you choose to put it in a suitcase under your bed or a shoebox under your bed, or bury it or burn it, whatever you decide to do with it, doing it is so freeing and so amazing.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how freeing it was. I remember I read it to my daughter. We read our letters to each other, and then we burned it afterwards. Seeing that bitch burn up, it was like, oh God, I got all those feelings out. And I want that for you so much. So you already put it out there. It's going to happen. Okay. No matter how long it takes, it's going to happen. You're going to have your day. And I cannot wait for that to happen for you. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, couple more questions. What is one piece of advice you would tell your childhood self, being the man that you are today and everything that you've gone through?
I would love to tell myself to just enjoy the ride, that it is a freaking roller coaster, but it's going to be whatever you make it. But most importantly, especially with the way that religion plays into a factor with so many people and so many things, that one of the biggest, best realizations I had is that if hell is filled with people like me, it can't be that bad of a place. When I had that realization, it helped me realize how good I really am, how pure my heart really is. Yes, I screw up. Yes, you're going to be mad at me, but I'm also going to take that ownership, and I'm going to try to fix it and deserve the chances to do so. So as corny as it sounds, I would love to just tell little David that you got this, dude. You're good.
And give him a hug and a kiss and tell him you love him.
Yes. And take him shopping, because we both love to shop.
Yes, yes. I'm actually doing that after we hop off this call. I love that. Okay, so I want to know, since you're on the Watch Us Thrive podcast, tell me, what does thriving mean to you?
So thriving to me is, I want to find those trails of buckets of gasoline to just keep fueling my fire. I want goals, but to no end. I want to just keep going. And I try so hard, even doing little things like writing little affirmations and putting on my mirror for when I'm brushing my teeth to remind myself to pat yourself on the back. I love the word thrive. I love the word thriving because it's just motivation. I love to be motivated. I love having shows like this. People ask me, and I'm sure you get it too, like, how do you rehash your trauma and people's trauma every day? But we kind of make sense. Like, I love both of our shows, right? We kind of make sandwiches. We have a positive. We start with something light and fun, and we end on something light and fun. Because in the middle, we're talking about that deep, dark, heavy stuff. But I'm already getting those chills and motivation to, when we hit end, I want to go do something. And that you today are part of what is filling my cup. This show and your audience today is part of what is filling my cup. And so that's a long answer, but there it is.
No, it's a perfect answer. I love that so much. And, I'm really glad that you brought up the whole, like, how can you talk about this all the time without it fucking you up or triggering you? And I'm like, I've done a lot of work, and I feel like I said before, there's such a healing in sharing our truth and sharing our story. I do it purposely, that we start off with the heavy shit and then we end with the feel good, thriving vibes, because I don't want to leave people feeling like, oh my God, like that was a lot. And then that's going to just carry on to my day. It's very strategic, but it's such a beautiful thing to be able to come across people like you who have gone through the darkest of the dark and have been able to turn it around, and you're using your voice, your power, your strength to help others. That is why we do what we do. That is the reason. Like you getting that email from that person, right? There is a purpose to all of this, and we need to keep talking about it in order to help others find their own strength within themselves. So if I could be an example, and you're definitely an example, I'm going to keep doing it until the day I die. I probably even in my afterlife too.
Oh, yeah. You're not shutting me up now.
No, absolutely not. All right. So, final question. I want to know, what legacy do you want to leave this earth? If someone has to sit down and write about David, what do you want them to say about you?
I will be so honored and so proud if whoever's doing my eulogies, if they say, I learned from David. David opened my mind. David taught me to love myself, even my flaws. And David taught me how to love people that are different than me. That's what I want.
You're absolutely doing that. This is just the beginning of the journey for you. And I'm so, so excited to continue watching you grow and thrive and achieve all the endless goals that you have for yourself. I know my audience is going to want to know more about you. They're going to want to listen to your podcast and everything else. So please plug it in. What are you working on and how we can follow you?
Yeah, so I try to keep everything simple. My name, David Keck, is a simple Google away. And then the name of my show is Surviving Abuse Podcast on all platforms, social medias, and podcast platforms. Before we get too far off this, though, I have a little surprise for you. I was going to tell you before, and I was like, no, I'm going to wait until the end. So I've got a surprise for you and your listeners. We mentioned that my merch came out. I'm not trying to get rich, but as we all know, it takes money to do this. I'm also in the process of working on trying to get with other charities and foundations that, of course, there's going to be a lot of vetting. I want to make sure that anybody's money goes to a good place, but I'm wanting to start helping this community. So we started a merch store. Oh, I'm actually wearing a shirt today.
Yes, I love that.
But we've got all the things. Some things on there are kind of funny just because of my humor. I did it kind of as a little joke, but people were loving it. Like you can have a shower curtain with my name on it. You can.
I love that. You better secure the bag, okay?
Look, there is a David and Surviving Abuse podcast puzzle. Like there's all kinds of things. And so I created a promo code for you and your people in case y'all want to check it out and help support. And it's Thrive15 and it'll save you 15% on your order. And I would love for you all to check it out. Check out my show. Like seriously, make sure you do this for your lovely host too. All reviews on everything truly, truly helps. If anybody could gift me anything, it would be a review. Even the bad ones still get us up in that algorithm, honey. So
exactly.
Because we need to get everyone's story out there. So even if you don't want to go buy a t-shirt, just do it for both of us. A review would be amazing and greatly appreciated.
Yes. Please, y'all. You guys are like sending us DMs and all that, and we love that, but we need to see it in the places where we need to see it, right? So please leave a rating and review. Check out the merch. I'm going to definitely link everything in the show notes. David, I adore you so much. Thank you so much for simply being you, doing the work that you do. It's not easy. It's a journey that you're going to be on forever, but just to know that you've been able to turn it around and you are the strong, beautiful man that you are today, despite everything that you've gone through. Like, I just want to give you all the flowers and support. Thank you so much. I can't wait to meet you in person. I'm going to come to Tennessee and we're going to hang out because you are incredible. Thank you.
It's going to be great. I can't wait. Thank you for all you do.
Thanks.